Last week, I was in Washington, D.C., visiting family. I have 4 sisters and a brother that live up there. Actually, they live in Ashburn, Virginia, which is about 30 minutes from D.C. While we were there, my son turned 16. So one evening, we were at a sushi restaurant. He loves sushi. Sitting there, and my little sister has a new tattoo on her wrist. And at first I was pretty offended because she's 19, but then I read it and it said, "It is what it is." And that means a lot to me. See, immediately when I saw the tattoo, I was reminded, I just had this flood of emotion and memories back to April 24th of 2010. I was at Joe T. Garcia's with my wife. We were sharing a meal with some friends, and I remember the day specifically because it was an absolutely perfect day. It was about 73 degrees, 72, 73 degrees. Chips and salsa were on the table, and the cold beer just showed up, and we were sitting under a canopy of trees. And I remember thinking, it can't be any better than this. It was magical. And then right then, I got a buzz on my cell phone. It was a text message, so I pulled out my phone and I read it. And it was from my sister, and she said, "Dad's been in an accident, call me." So, but it was a very generic text message. I didn't think anything about it, so I called her. And she tells me Dad was hit in the head playing softball, and that he's in the hospital, he's on life support, he's not going to make it, you need to get here. So, instantly, as you can imagine, I just lost all the blood in my body, and I hung up the phone, and I just started crying. And then I ordered my wife could tell that I'd been upset, and she said, "What's going on?" I told her, and she said, she started crying as well. So I got on the phone with my mom trying to catch a flight out that night. I couldn't, there was nothing out, so I just worried. I got the first flight out Sunday morning to DC, and I remember getting to the hospital about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I remember walking into the ICU room and seeing my father, his lifeless body, there. And I said my goodbyes to Dad. And I remember looking at the little dry erase board that's on the wall that the doctors and nurses scribbled things on. And my brother-in-law wrote on there, "It is what it is." That was my dad's favorite saying. And I remember there's a few things that Dad had taught me, and I wanted to share with you guys. One, Dad loved to laugh. He had a phenomenal personality. Matter of fact, my wife is always getting on to me because I don't take things very seriously. I remember one time he picked me up when I went to go visit him in D.C., and we stopped at a restaurant on the way home, and at that time our favorite TV show was The Office, and if you know anything about The Office, Steve Carell, his favorite saying is, "That's what she said." And so I tripped over a curb and said something, and somehow he turned into something perverted and said, "That's what she said." So we both started crying, just as laughing. See, another thing that Dad was, or that he taught me, was that there's a blessing in all circumstances. And this was pretty profound for me because I remember Dad telling me, one time we were talking about his business. He was a home builder. In 2008, 2009, 2010 was a very rough year in business. And I remember him telling me that he just would get up in the morning, take any job that came his way, and that he was just trying the best he could, and he just trusted that God would take care of the rest. If he gave it all he could, he would take care of the rest. And he would always finish up by saying, "Hey, it is what it is. It is what it is." And if you'll flip your pages over, there's a story, one of many, the Washington Post, about Dad. And one of the other things that he taught me, you'll see on the second page, the very last paragraph, was a little excerpt from David Pittman, who was his lifelong friend and pastor of 17 years. They went on many mission trips together. And one of the things that Dad taught me was to love and to value people. And one of his best friends, Victor, had said, he told me that he just had a way of making everybody feel important. And David Pittman, in the very last paragraph, stated that he you know, if I know anything about George, there'll be a few hundred people at his funeral. There was actually over 1,000 people at Dad's funeral. One of the most important lessons that Dad taught me that I want to share with you is that life is but a vapor. You have no guarantees. You have no promises of tomorrow. And now, as I was prepping for this, I came across a quote from Frederick Buechner, and he said, "Intellectually, we all know that we're going to die, but we do not really live with the knowledge that where it becomes a part of us. We do not really live as if it was true. Ironically, we live as though we'll live forever." And so, with that, you know, I remember April 24th of every year, and I remember Dad's laughs. I remember his lightheartedness. I remember how he was with people. I remember the accident. But what I remember most about Dad was his quote, which became his lifelong mantra: "It is what it is." Thank you.